Hi, welcome back to Grains in Small Places. Today I want to talk about questions I get asked a lot, like what do I do with my extra bread or leftover bread or bread that's getting ready to go bad. I'll share a few of these ideas throughout the video with you, but I'm going to be making today a bread pudding, and we're going to be making it with one of my basically testing loaves from my recipe testing that I've had in my freezer for a little while, and I figured let's let it sit out, start to dry a little bit, and then we can make some bread pudding with it. So let's get started. Okay, so I have a somewhat undesirable loaf from recipe testing here, and I believe this is my sourdough sandwich bread. This was before I had it just right. But you can use any leftover breads that you have. This is just a whole loaf. You could use, if you were going to make this like specifically like prime best, I would recommend my challah recipe or a French bread. I do have a French bread recipe as well. Any of those would be delicious, but in reality, any bread that you have, even if you have a mixture, so like this loaf and I have like a half a loaf of this bread we could probably use, or rolls or hamburger buns, any leftover bread. This is really great to use up some of those. So we're going to start out cutting this into about 1-inch cubes. And not that this bread loaf, it wasn't bad or anything wrong with it. It just wasn't exactly how we wanted it yet. So it's just kind of been sitting there. Nobody's been eating it in my freezer. I went ahead and defrosted it, let it sit on the counter overnight last night so that we could make this today. I wanted to clear up some freezer space because I have a Azure standard haul coming next week, I think it is. So I wanted to go ahead and make sure I used up some of the stuff that we have sitting in there. Oh, let me grab a bowl. Okay, so I'm just going to put the cubes of bread into this. That way when we go to put the liquid or wet ingredients in there, we can mix it all together. This doesn't have to be perfect. And another thing you could use your leftover bread for that, like, say maybe wasn't perfect or you have a lot left, you could always do, I have just a small little quick recipe for croutons. They taste amazing. And another thing you can do with bread that maybe is slightly past its, a little bit stale, is make French toast, which I guess this bread pudding is very similar to a French toast. But also you could always let it sit on the counter outside of the bag to dry out, so just like basically open to the air, and then you can use that, blend it up, make some breadcrumbs, and then you can use that in basically, if you do meatloafs or meatballs, anything, breading, your chicken or anything like that, anything you would want to use breadcrumbs for. I always love coming up with some new ways to use up some bread, because we all know when we make this bread homemade, it's, doesn't last as long as what our store-bought bread used to last, because it does go stale quicker. Obviously, that's because we don't have all the preservatives when we're making our bread at home. So that's a great thing. Okay, so now we're going to start the liquid portion, and we're going to use 5 eggs. So again, this is kind of like a play on French toast, I guess, because it really does have that flavor profile. Okay, so to our 5 eggs, we're going to add about 3 cups of half and half. And I will make sure to put a link in the description box below. The link will have weights also. And then I'm gonna save this half and half. We've been enjoying this A2 brand. I'm gonna save the rest of this half and half because the other cup that's left in here I'm going to use for the like icing drizzle, which is so good. So basically for this recipe, I'm using a full quart of half and half. You could also use milk and heavy cream mixture. Actually, the icing portion is probably a little bit better with heavy cream, but I can't find a heavy cream that I like that doesn't have either a carrageenan in it or some kind of filler or chemical. There are several brands of cream that I like, and when I'm in the area and I can find it, I like to grab it, but it's not always available in all the areas where we are. Alrighty, we're gonna add a cup of sugar. If you or your family doesn't like things super sweet, or you're using a really sweet bread, you could decrease this sugar by about half, or you could use honey or maple syrup or whatever sweetener you want to use. And I'm going to use about 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon. This is that Ceylon cinnamon that we really have been enjoying. I'll make sure to put a link to this and some of the other things you're seeing me using in the description box below. I'll also make sure to put a link to this recipe, and I'll try to remember all the other recipes that I've mentioned, like the sourdough sandwich bread and the challah, and of course this bread pudding recipe as well. Okay, and then we're going to use about 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. I really enjoy, as you know if you've been watching me for a while, whole nutmeg, so I just take a whole nutmeg. I bought like, I don't know, a pack of 10 off of Amazon probably 1.5 years ago, and I'm still working on that. At the same time, I also gave some away because this is a lot. So I just keep them stored in a jar like this at room temperature. This is about what I have left, but the flavor is really enhanced. Okay, and then we're gonna do about 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And this is what I have of my homemade vanilla. I probably should get started on another batch, and I think I might try something other than vodka. I'm thinking about trying something, maybe some spiced rum or something like that to make it, just to see if it's any different and we prefer it. But with how quick we go through that, I probably should get started on that here soon. Okay, and then we're just gonna mix all these ingredients together. Sometimes that cinnamon doesn't really want to mix in all that great, and that's fine. It'll get there. Really just wanting to make sure that that sugar is mixed in and incorporated with the half and half and the eggs, so that when we pour it out, we'll get an even distribution. Okay, that's probably good. Okay, so we're going to take this and pour this over. Apparently I didn't do a very good job mixing the egg because there was one in there that wasn't broken yet. Those farm fresh eggs are so much stronger than the ones that I get from the store. Sometimes I underestimate those happy chickens. Okay, so I don't need to whisk this with the whisk, but I've already got this dirty, so I'm just going to use this to mix everything together. And it's going to look very liquidy at first because the bread hasn't absorbed any of the liquids yet. So what we're going to do is just let this sit. I just want to make sure that everything is mixed together and there's, you know, all the bread pieces are broken apart. Nothing's stuck together. All the eggs are combined, making kind of like a nice custard. Well, what will be a custard, I guess, after we're done baking it. We're going to let this sit and do some soaking for about 20 minutes. So I'll be back in 20 minutes. We're gonna preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is gonna cook somewhere between 50 and 60 minutes. Alrighty, so it's now been 20 minutes for this to absorb. It's still gonna be liquidy, which is fine, and we're gonna pour this whole thing into baking pan. If you want to make this in like an 8x8 baking pan, I would probably recommend to do half this recipe. All right. This is my 9x13 pan, and I like to wrinkle this up a couple times. That way it's easier to stay, otherwise it tends to just keep falling out. Then you want to make sure that you spray, I'm lining this with parchment paper. You can use a glass pan and just butter and or spray it really well. That way it doesn't stick. Make sure you get up the sides. And then I'm just gonna pour this entire thing straight into here. Okay. And then evenly distribute this. It will continue to soak up as we go. I guess I needed just a slight bit bigger piece of parchment paper. Oh well, it is what it is now. Alrighty, and then this is very carefully going to go into the oven. Okay, so while that is baking, we're gonna work on the sauce. For this sauce, I'm going to need just a little tiny bit of flour. So I'm just gonna measure out about 7 grams of wheat berries, mill this, and it's going to give me about 1 to 2 tablespoons of flour. This is soft white wheat. You could use any leftover flour that you might have sitting in your fridge or refrigerator that you've milled another day. But I'm gonna go ahead and take this over to my mill. Okay, so now we've got that milled. I'm just gonna set that to the side, and then we're gonna pull this up here so we can cook the sauce so it's ready to be poured on as we serve this. So to make this like vanilla cream, we're going to whisk together the sugar, the flour, and the heavy cream until it's all combined in our saucepan. So this is a 1/2 cup of sugar. You could, of course, enjoy this bread pudding without the vanilla topping. I think this just takes it over the top. Okay, we're gonna add in that flour that we just milled, and we should have 1 more cup of our heavy cream left, which this would probably work a little bit better, like I was saying, with heavy cream, and I accidentally said heavy cream. This is 1/2 and 1/2. But it would probably work a little bit better with heavy cream. It'll get just a bit thicker. So if you have that, that might be an option that you want to do. I'm going to turn this on medium high, and we're just going to whisk this together till it's combined and the sugar starts to melt. Okay, so I'm starting to see some of the steam building. Looks like all of my sugar has dissolved and melted. So I'm gonna add in my 4 tablespoons of butter. This is a salted butter. You could make it without, with unsalted and just put a tiny pinch of salt in here. It may or may not be necessary. But we're going to do this until the butter is melted, and then this starts to boil, and then we don't want it to be a heavy boil, so like a light simmer, and then it should start to thicken as well. But we don't want it to be super thick, so we'll just keep an eye on it here. Okay, so we can see it's starting to simmer. Our butter is almost completely melted. Just gonna take it a little bit further because I don't want this to be thick like an icing or anything like that. We want it to still be pourable. So basically right when it comes to that boil, I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the heat. Don't walk away from this. You want to make sure that you are continuing to stir it so that it doesn't burn to the bottom. And you don't want to boil heavily this milk because it could curdle it. I guess it's not milk. I guess it's half and half or heavy cream, but you get the idea. Okay, so we can see it's getting just to the point where it wants to be a heavy boil. It still keeps bubbling as I'm stirring it. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the heat. Make sure you turn off the heat before you add your vanilla. So it's slightly thickened, but it's still nice and pourable. And then it thickens a little bit as it cools because this is still very hot. So we're gonna go back to that vanilla and add about a teaspoon of that. You could also add some vanilla bean paste in here or even maple sugar instead of regular sugar. That would be really good. And once that's all stirred in, I'm going to go ahead and just remove this from the heat so it's nice and ready to go when our bread pudding is finished. Okay, here it is. I'm gonna go ahead and check the temperature of the center just to make sure that the eggs are fully cooked. Oh yeah. I just want to make sure that it's over 160 degrees in the center. Other than that, this is good to go. It started to pull away from the edges. This looks great. In my oven with this size pan, it only took 50 minutes, but in your oven, it may take a little bit longer. So I'm just gonna let this cool just a little bit so I can slice it. Otherwise, it'll kind of just fall apart. So if I let it cool just maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then we can put on the sauce. And I will, of course, bring you along when we decide to slice it. Okay, so now this has had, 10 minutes, 20 minutes or so to cool. It's nice and it's thickened, but yet it's still drizzly. This has been cool. It's still very warm, but it's been cooling for about 15, 20 minutes. Oh wow, this is really good. It is sweet though, so if you're not into super sweet, you may want to skip the step of this. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pour on about half of this mixture. Let's see if I can do this. It's a heavy pan. So I'm going to pour on half the mixture. I'm guessing that's about half. And then I'm going to save the other half for drizzling on when we go to serve it. So I'm just going to spread this about. And we're going to just let that kind of just melt in as this cools. This is also a great meal if you want to just prepare this and get all of the bread sliced and all of the, I guess, custard stuff all mixed together. Put it in your pan and everything and get it ready to go. And then cover it, put it in your refrigerator. Then the next morning you can pull it out of the refrigerator and put it in the oven and it will be ready to go in the morning for a perfect breakfast. Just trying to get it all the way to the edges. Okay, we're just gonna let this melt in kind of as it cools down. And then we can, of course, top it up with a little bit more of the stuff that we have saved once we cut this. Kind of excited. Okay, so we'll be back when we go to slice this. Thanks for hanging out with me today while we made this delicious bread pudding. And I hope you found some ideas that maybe sparked your interest that you can try out with your leftover breads. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends, and thanks for stopping by Grains in Small Places. Goodbye.